into, there was a Pro Bowl announcement last night. The 49ers had 8 Pro Bowlers. It was Brock Purdy, who was by far the most voted for quarterback or player in general, but also quarterback in the NFC. Kyle Juszczyk, Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, Bosa, Hargrave, Fred Warner, Charvarius Ward. Little knock for our guy. Happy for him.
First timer.
What?
First time Pro Bowl for him.
I know. He's Steve Wilkes. Do you think that Steve Wilkes deserves credit for that? Like,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And even Charvarius Ward even said that in the preseason or training camp before preseason started. He's like, what are your thoughts about Steve Wilkes? Or I think he said that in OTAs actually. Is like about his defensive background, secondary background. Is like, I'm hoping that because of that, it's gonna unleash me, unlock me, and like push me forward. And it's doing it. He's doing it. They play a little more man coverage, I feel like, and like the fact that you're blitzing also probably forces you into that situation. He's been stellar, other than probably like 4 games in the first half of the season. He's been phenomenal. And the only reason why those 4 games he looked ugly in was mainly because of like stretches where he had penalties and would have like a bad rep or two. But ultimately, that never like tells the full story about a second play in the secondary, which is always crazy to me. People will look like, oh, he had 1 bad or 2 passes given up, and it's like, and he played terrible. It's like if there's anything that casual football fans don't know the least about, it's about like secondary play. Like everything's always just bad for them, no matter what.
I think it might have been Eric Crocker, or it was this guy Theo Vaughn. He made a tweet after the Pro Bowl announcement came out, and he said like fans that vote on secondary and safety players when they're not even on the team are hilarious or something.
Like Budda Baker. How did Budda Baker make it over Antoine Winfield? How did L'Jarius Sneed not make it?
For like 90% of the season. Didn't he just come back too? I feel like he's played in like 5 games, maybe.
I don't know. That's what I'm saying. No one was looking at. Who else made quarterback in the NFC? I honestly didn't even look at that. Stafford and Dak. Aha, Jalen Hurts didn't make it. That's funny.
That is funny. Especially because a couple of weeks ago, like if you would have had that conversation, who's better, Jalen Hurts or Brock Purdy? People would have fought you if you said Brock Purdy.
This season, it's better. And like,
I would have fought people.
I mean, shoot, after the Eagles game, you asked me, like, who would you take for a franchise? I said Hurts, but, I mean, shoot, I'm looking a little wrong on that the way it keeps going because Hurts' processing is, like, poor, and that's something Purdy is really good at. So I'm taking an L on that one.
He has that scramble ability, but the rest of his game is...
Yeah, of course, he's an athletic freak, and he's great. And
he's really regressed this year. Like, his performance in that Super Bowl last year was one of the best performances we've seen in a while from a quarterback.
Hell yeah. But I think it's a lot largely in top point because like offensive coordinator is gone, Shane Steichen. Because look, Steichen I think the Colts are winning their end. I think that's insane. Who the hell with Gardner Minshew? So I mean, that was always my question mark. You're losing your offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator. That was my huge question mark about them. And with the 49ers, like question mark is how's Purdy going to look coming from the elbow, and is he going to start to regress middle of the way of the season now that people have more film on him? And not only has he not regressed, he's gotten better, and the elbow's the thing of the past. Where the Eagles' concerns I had question marks about are proven right. Like defense in shambles. No Jonathan Gannon was better than people thought. Shane Steichen was as good as people thought. And sure enough, regression. Because Ben Johnson, I don't know. Ever since that week 2 game I saw on Thursday night against the Minnesota Vikings, I'm like, what the hell are these route combinations? Because that was when I was able to put it on Prime Vision where you get the all-22 view. And I'm like, what are these route concepts, these combinations? Like, this is such a G League type of like high school offense. And it's like, dude, but maybe it's because also like Jalen Hurts can't like read that. I don't know. To me, it was a huge change. Like, yeah, Hurts' offensive coordinator definitely is trash. Like, I blame him more for Hurts' woes than Hurts. I mean, Hurts is definitely regressed on his own, but the offensive coordinator is.
When we are talking about like narratives to start the season versus now, I'll say like takes that I've had wrong. I thought the same thing. I thought Brock Purdy's elbow would potentially like get weaker as I thought like maybe he'd develop
those are fair concerns
arm soreness. Like I just thought his elbow. So I was worried about Brock Purdy as the season went on, and I thought the opposite with the Eagles. I thought that they would start off really rocky, and that's why I was impressed that they were winning. And people were like, "Oh, well, they're point differential," but I always thought like, "Oh, give them a little bit of time because it's just going to take for their offense and defensive coordinator to kind of mesh." And I thought they would be like the team that was going into the playoffs, kind of.
Same.
extending.
remember those
Whatever.
first 6 games, they were still good, but it was like they just looked sluggish. Like it was more most of them beating themselves. And then I think they had like a game or two where they looked like themselves, and then it's like outside of that, it's just been wow. Okay, no, that really was who they were. That really was who they were. Like I like to play that way too, like slow play. Like give me 6 games first before I really can like have an idea, and then sure enough, that's what ends up happening.
Now, I will say, back to the Pro Bowlers really quick, and we're talking about Brock Purdy and maybe all the help he has. No Pro Bowl wide receivers for Brock Purdy, so it's basically all on his own. It's all on his shoulders. Did you think that? Did you think that Brandon Ayuk was snubbed? That's kind of been a bit of a conversation. I feel like I've always had such a controversial take about Brandon Ayuk, and to be fair, I think a lot of it has just come from like weird bias where I like Debo a lot, and I always felt like in order to prop up Debo Samuel, people always, or in order to prop up Brandon Ayuk, people would bash Debo by like calling one of them a true wide receiver or not. And so my thought was always that like Brandon Ayuk is probably the most consistent player on the team, but he hasn't had like those wow games yet, those wow moments. And that's probably, in my opinion, why because he was in when it was just fan voting, but when it came to coaching and players, I wonder if other players. What do you think that he was snubbed not making it? I have some numbers written down from an article that was posted on your site comparing him to the 4 Pro Bowlers that did get in. I also think it's weird, like it's weird because it's compared to the other teams in the NFL. It's not because like you wouldn't consider Kyle Juszczyk more important to the 49ers than Brandon Ayuk.
It's just
But that's like not
positional.
how
It's
it
just
works.
it's just comparing position by position and your conference. That's why. So it's not really like, oh yeah.
That's crazy. Would you rather, if you were the Eagles, I would rather have Debo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk than. Is that true? Am I saying too much? If you were the Rams, if you were any of the NFC teams, would you rather have their wide receiving core than ours? Because we have 0 Pro Bowl wide receivers. Not we, the 49ers. But
Uh well, I think they're thriving what they are now, the Rams, right? So I mean, look, I don't think he was snubbed, but I'll say arguably he was not snubbed, meaning like I can see one way or the other, meaning I don't feel definitive on this. I just understand it because the NFC has stacked wide receivers. People underrate those rare receivers in the NFC. CeeDee Lamb was no duh lock because he's really turned it up. He might end up having, when we look at it after the season, like, man, he was the better receiver than Tyreek Hill this year, huh? And then number 2, who else made it in?
really,
AJ Brown. Okay, honestly, of all the receivers I thought that got in that should be kept out, people say Puka Nacua. I say AJ Brown. But I think the only reason why AJ Brown got it is because for 5 straight games, didn't he have 125 plus 150 yards straight, and which is an NFL record? I think that's what tipped him in. Because ultimately, outside of those 5 games, like
he's dropped off. These last
he dropped
if you
off.
were
He
only
goes,
voting
like to
based
me,
off
it's
the
like
last 5 games, Brandon Ayuk is by far better than AJ Brown. AJ
this
Brown
season.
has been like
And look, I hate that
there's
saying
a point
too.
kind of coming out of the Eagles that he's kind of at the center of a lot of the chaos that's going on because of.
I hate that saying too about like Brandon Ayuk's better than AJ Brown because no, he's not. It's just he's having the better season. This is why I think people like really mix it up. It's like, oh, but he's the better player. It's like, okay, look, Pro Bowl is not about who's better. It's about it's singular season in a vacuum. 2023 season. Who was better? If you want to argue,
I think that makes the case worse. I think AJ Brown probably has a better career so far than Brandon Ayuk. I'm not.
AJ Brown's the better player. I'm taking AJ Brown 10 times out of 10.
This season, I think Ayuk
This
has
season,
had
I
the
would
better
take
season.
Ayuk. Ayuk's had a better season this year because also you look at it, he is leading the league in what yards per reception, meaning the guy just generates chunk plays. The guy's a walking first down basically, and like even though like you said he doesn't have like too many highlight games, he does have some highlight moments and some sweet plays. But it's because again, like he's not the option on the 49ers, even though he kind of feel like he's been for a good 2 months of the season, versus like those other guys. Puka Nacua I thought was worthy. I know people want to argue that, but I think it's like, look, dude, he balled his ass off with Cooper Kupp out.
We're talking about there's been a content creator in the 49ers space who was really critical of Brandon Ayuk a little while ago. And I'm team being critical of Brandon Ayuk. I think I'm like more like I've been hesitant about the 49ers even keeping him. But Puka Nacua although amazing for a rookie and with his receiving yards and yards per catch, he's only 4 yards behind Brandon Ayuk, but he only has 5 touchdowns. So if you're talking about touchdowns, people
But
were really
again,
critical about
what do
Ayuk
you
only
say?
having.
What is your logic in the MVP? That's my logic I apply to Puka Nacua. Like who else was on that offense with Cooper Kupp? And even Cooper Kupp was only dominant for 2 weeks. So
But
he
that's
pretty much,
shouldn't he have more then? Like shouldn't like Brandon Ayuk only has 7 touchdowns because
but that's
like
because
20
Ayuk is
of them
running
go to
10
Christian
plus.
McCaffrey. Sorry,
Ayuk's running
Christian.
those 10 plus yards route. Puka Nacua is an intermediate to short guy. So if for that point you're using his styles against him, which I don't think is
Okay.
fair. So again, I go back to Brandon Ayuk probably should have been in over AJ Brown. I don't think he was a snub because it's stacked because all these receivers are really good. Puka Nacua is good. Amon-Ra
Look,
St. Brown
listen
didn't
to
get
this.
in.
AJ
Amon-Ra
Brown,
St. Brown did not get in. And he's a
AJ
good player.
Brown, AJ Brown 7 touchdowns, Brandon Ayuk 7 touchdowns. AJ Brown 13.8 yards per catch, Brandon Ayuk 18.3 yards per catch. The receiving yards is only about 100 off with 1,300 basically for Brandon Ayuk and 1,400 for AJ Brown. But when it comes to targets, AJ Brown has 60 more targets. So like their touchdowns are the same. Brandon Ayuk is better than him at average yards per catch.
Volume's getting used against Ayuk. Yeah, volume's getting used against him. But the
Yeah.
thing is, it's like, okay, if your volume's not high, what are you doing with it? And he's doing the most of it.
Mike Evans low-key killing it this year, by the way.
Yeah, that's why who would have thought, right? Considering you had Baker Mayfield, and for a second I thought, was Mike Evans deserving? I was like, actually, no. He's kind of had been going off on big plays after big plays, and he kind of is like the leader
13
on offense.
touchdowns. He has the out of everyone in the Pro Bowl, he has the most yards per catch. Now I don't know if him and Ayuk both just run deeper routes more often.
Mike Evans has always been a deep threat.
I
Though,
will say he doesn't have a good catch percentage compared to everyone else. Like he has a little bit less targets than the other guys, but he only has 76 catches, which is pretty much what Ayuk has with way less targets. Well, I guess the other guys all have about 60 more targets than them. Yeah, Mike Evans doing great.
Yeah, but again, like Ayuk got snubbed, so did Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Amon-Ra St. Brown is a Pro Bowl as worthy to be a Pro Bowler. So it's like it really was just a result of just having a stacked, almost oversaturation of top receivers in a way. And again, if the one player you're going to take out, I think it's AJ Brown, not Puka Nacua. You know, it's him for sure. Like CeeDee Lamb for sure, Mike Evans for sure. You know, AJ Brown's the one that probably should have came out especially because he only had. It's really because of that 5-game streak where he broke records. That's why. That's why I think he's in it ultimately. But yeah, Brandon Ayuk's kind of a proponent of unfortunate circumstance that he's not a high volume guy, and the fact that he probably isn't like the 1 or 2 option, even though I think he kind of is the 2 option in the offense. So yeah, it's just, I mean, ultimately it's just the Pro Bowl, right? Like who's going to be all pro, who's going to go. But yeah, I think if you want to say he's a snub, I have no problem with it. But I personally don't think he was a snub because, again, Amon-Ra had a case too, and he was out. So it just shows like everything was stacked.
Can you explain to me the All-Pro thing? Is that's only voted on by
That's
coaches?
from the Associated Press. Yeah, they voted on it. And I kind of take, which is kind of funny because like players and coaches vote for Pro Bowl, but we view the Associated Press by writers better. But ultimately, I feel like All Pro, for the most part, is always pretty spot on in who they get it
Well,
right.
maybe they put more effort, like how I was saying that maybe like players might tend to vote for their teammates and their friends, and fans are just voting.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure
like
how
maybe
they
the
break
media
it
thinks
down.
it more like they're trying to give a more honest.
Imagine the NFL. You know that NFL Top 100 that they started 10 years ago that runs every March every year. Like that NFL Top 100 rankings is like the most ludicrous rankings I've ever seen in my life, and that's run by the players. I think maybe even coaches too, but I know players for sure. And I'm just like, who the hell put this guy up here? Why is he in the top 100? So yeah, your point in that probably resonates the same way as the Pro Bowl voting. So yeah, maybe some players are hating on Ayuk. It's like, oh, we'll put it to these guys because Ayuk's not even the best player in his offense, yada, yada, yada. So it's like, yeah, but the fact that he's not that is the case for why he should probably be in it. Again, like, I don't feel like he was snubbed. I'm not saying he's deserving of being out of it. If you told me he was in it, I'd be like, great, he deserved it. You told me he's out of it. Well, it's stacked. I feel like it's not because of what he didn't do. I feel like it's just what's around him.
I agree.